April 11th, 1986. The Florida sun was relentless as a quiet suburban street in Miami-Dade County was about to become the epicenter of a tectonic shift in American law enforcement. At 9:30 a.m., a team of 8 FBI agents moved in to apprehend 2 violent bank robbers, William Maddox and Michael Platt. The agents were experienced, well-trained, and armed with the standard-issue tools of their trade: Smith & Wesson, .357 Magnum revolvers, a few semi-automatic 9mm pistols, and shotguns. They were prepared for a fight, but they were not prepared for the war they were about to enter. What was supposed to be a felony traffic stop erupted into one of the most ferocious gun battles in American history. The ensuing firefight, known forever as the Miami-Dade Shootout, lasted less than 5 minutes, but it exposed a fatal, decades-old flaw in police armament. While the agents fought with courage and remarkable accuracy, they were catastrophically outgunned. Their 6-shot revolvers were no match for the Ruger Mini 14 semi-automatic rifle wielded by Platt. For every carefully aimed shot from an agent's revolver, a hail of high-velocity rifle rounds tore through their cars and bodies. The most terrifying moments came not during the shooting, but during the silence in between. Wounded agents, their revolvers empty, desperately fumbled with speed loaders, trying to feed 6 more rounds into their cylinders while a storm of bullets rained down upon them. They scored multiple disabling hits on the suspects early in the fight, but it wasn't enough. The suspects' superior firepower allowed them to keep fighting long after they should have been incapacitated. When the smoke cleared, the scene was a slaughterhouse. 2 FBI agents were dead. 5 more were seriously wounded. The suspects were also dead, but they had inflicted a devastating toll. The Miami-Dade Shootout was more than a tragedy. It was a brutal, bloody verdict. It was the moment American law enforcement was forced to admit that its trusted sidearm, the 6-shot revolver, a symbol of authority for nearly a century, was now a relic, a death sentence in the face of modern criminal firepower. The police needed a new weapon. They needed more capacity, faster reloads, and uncompromising reliability under the unimaginable stress of a gunfight. And the answer wouldn't come from the hallowed halls of Colt or Smith & Wesson. It would come from an Austrian engineer named Gaston Glock, a man who, until recently, was better known for making curtain rods and entrenching tools for the military. For generations, the sound of American law enforcement wasn't a siren, but a distinct mechanical click-clack, the sound of a revolver cylinder being closed. The revolver was more than a tool. It was an article of faith. From the beat cops walking the streets of New York with their Smith & Wesson Model 10s to the highway patrolmen in California with their formidable Colt Pythons, the wheel gun was an extension of the officer's hand and will. Its appeal was rooted in a powerful, simple logic. It was mechanically intuitive, utterly reliable, and its operation could be mastered with practice. There was no safety to forget in a panic, no magazine to fail to seat properly. You pulled the trigger, it went bang 6 times, every time. This dependability, paired with the sheer stopping power of legendary cartridges like the .357 Magnum, made the revolver the undisputed king of police sidearms. It was a symbol of rugged American individualism and steadfast authority. But while police departments revered their traditions, the streets they patrolled were undergoing a violent transformation. The 1980s saw the explosion of the crack cocaine epidemic, which fueled an unprecedented level of gang violence and organized crime. Drug trafficking operations, flush with cash, began arming their enforcers not with cheap Saturday night specials, but with sophisticated, military-grade hardware. Suddenly, police officers were facing criminals wielding weapons like the MAC-10 machine pistol, and, more commonly, a new generation of high-capacity semi-automatic pistols, the so-called Wonder Nines. These pistols, like the Beretta 92 and the Sig Sauer P226, held magazines containing 15, 17, or even more rounds. The balance of power had shifted, creating a terrifying chasm of firepower. A routine traffic stop could now devolve into a gun battle where a police officer, with their 6 rounds, faced a suspect who could fire almost 3 times as many shots before needing to reload. The methodical, deliberate process of reloading a revolver, ejecting 6 spent casings, and carefully inserting 6 new rounds from a dump pouch or a speed loader was a fatal anachronism in a world of 1-second magazine changes. The stories from the streets were becoming more and more grim. Officers were being killed not because they were outmatched in skill or courage, but because they were being overwhelmed by sheer volume of fire. The arms race on the streets of America had begun, and law enforcement, with its trusted 6-shooter, was losing. The glorious past had collided with a harsh new reality, and the need for a revolution was no longer a matter of debate, it was a matter of survival. While American law enforcement was grappling with its firepower crisis, a revolution was quietly brewing in Austria. It wasn't born in a centuries-old firearms manufactory, but in the modest workshop of Gaston Glock, a 52-year-old engineer. Glock was not a gunsmith. He had built a successful business making a variety of products, from curtain rods to military knives and machine gun belts. He knew polymer science and advanced manufacturing, but he had never designed a pistol. In 1980, when the Austrian military announced it was seeking a new sidearm, Glock saw an opportunity. His lack of experience in firearms design became his greatest asset. He was a blank slate, unburdened by the traditions and dogmas that had guided pistol design for 100 years. He approached the problem not as a gunmaker, but as an engineer solving a complex mechanical puzzle. The result was a weapon that the established firearms world initially laughed at before it was forced to reckon with its undeniable genius. The Glock pistol, designated the Glock 17, was built upon 3 pillars of revolutionary design, each of which directly addressed the needs of a modern fighting handgun. The first, and most visible, was its polymer frame. The idea of a plastic gun was met with widespread derision and suspicion. Critics dismissed it as a fragile toy, and sensationalist media spread unfounded fears that it would be invisible to airport X-ray machines. But for the end user, the polymer frame was a revelation. It made the pistol significantly lighter than its steel-framed counterparts, a critical advantage for an officer carrying a sidearm for a 10-hour shift. The material was impervious to rust and corrosion from sweat, rain, and humidity. It also had a unique flex that helped to absorb recoil, making the pistol more comfortable to shoot and allowing for faster follow-up shots. And for the city and state governments signing the checks, polymer was drastically cheaper to mass produce. The second pillar, and arguably the most important, was the safe action trigger system. Glock observed that under the immense stress of a life or death encounter, even trained officers could forget to disengage a manual safety lever. His solution was to eliminate it entirely. The Safe Action System features 3 independent automatic safeties that disengage sequentially as the trigger is pulled and re-engage when it's released. For the shooter, this meant one thing: if you pull the trigger, it fires. If you don't, it is safe. Critically, the trigger pull is the same for every single shot, from the first to the last. This was a night and day difference from the double-action, single-action pistols of the era, which had a long, heavy first trigger pull followed by a short, light pull for subsequent shots, a design that required extensive training to master. For police officers transitioning from revolvers, The Glock's consistent trigger felt familiar and intuitive, drastically shortening the training curve. Finally, the third pillar was its almost mythical simplicity and reliability. A Glock 17 consists of only 34 parts, a fraction of what was found in other contemporary designs. This elegant simplicity meant there was simply less to go wrong. Gaston Glock subjected his prototypes to a brutal regimen of torture tests, far exceeding any military requirement. The pistols were frozen in ice, boiled in water, buried in mud and sand, and run over by trucks. After every abuse, they came up shooting. This relentless focus on function over form created a tool of almost agricultural durability. It wasn't beautiful in the classic sense, but it was brutally efficient. It was a weapon that stripped the service pistol down to its absolute essence. A machine designed to fire every single time, no matter the conditions. When Glock pistols first arrived in the United States, the traditional American firearms community was deeply skeptical. Seasoned police officers and firearms instructors, raised on a diet of blued steel and polished walnut, viewed the blocky utilitarian plastic gun with a mixture of distrust and contempt. It lacked the familiar heft and the crafted feel of an American-made Smith & Wesson or Colt. Yet, Glock USA embarked on a marketing and sales campaign that was as ruthlessly efficient as the pistol itself. They understood that to break into the insular world of law enforcement procurement, they needed to make the switch not just appealing, but irresistible. They offered police departments incredibly generous trade-in programs, allowing them to swap their aging fleets of revolvers for brand new Glocks at a fraction of the cost. They established the Glock Armorer Certification Program, a masterstroke that empowered departments to service their own weapons, dramatically cutting long-term maintenance costs. The tipping point came when the New York City Police Department, the largest police force in the nation, officially adopted the Glock. That single contract acted as a massive nationwide endorsement, and the floodgates opened. Amidst this expansion, it was a specific model that would cement the brand's dominance, the Glock 19. The original Glock 17 was a full-sized military and duty handgun, and while excellent, its size could be cumbersome for some. The Glock 19, introduced in 1988, was its slightly smaller sibling, and it proved to be the perfect one-size-fits-all solution for the diverse needs of American law enforcement. It was a masterpiece of compromise. Its barrel and grip were shortened just enough to make it significantly more concealable for detectives and plainclothes officers, yet it was large enough to allow for a full, secure grip and serve as a primary sidearm for uniformed patrol officers. It struck a just right balance that few pistols had ever achieved. The true genius of the Glock 19 was that this reduction in size came with almost no reduction in capability. It still boasted a standard magazine capacity of 15 rounds of 9mm ammunition, 2.5 times the capacity of the old revolvers, and on par with most full-size service pistols of the day. This combination of concealable size and duty-level firepower was revolutionary. Furthermore, the slightly smaller frame proved to be a better fit for a wider range of hand sizes, a crucial factor as police forces were becoming increasingly diverse, with more female and minority officers joining the ranks. But departments weren't just adopting a pistol, they were adopting the Glock system. The genius of the platform was its absolute uniformity. A department could issue a Glock 17 to its SWAT team, a Glock 19 to its patrol officers and detectives, and a subcompact Glock 26 for deep concealment or as a backup weapon. An officer trained on one was instantly proficient with all of them. The trigger felt the same, the controls were in the same place, and the maintenance procedure was identical. This logistical elegance was a dream for department armorers and budget administrators. It streamlined training, simplified the supply chain for parts, and created a single, reliable ecosystem for the entire force. The Glock 19 wasn't just a better pistol, it was the heart of a better system that made American police departments more efficient, more capable, and ultimately safer. The adoption of the Glock 19 and the Glock platform as a whole was far more than a simple equipment upgrade. It was a seismic shift that fundamentally altered the philosophy of police training and combat doctrine in the United States. The era of the revolver had ingrained a certain mindset. With only 6 rounds available, every shot had to be a carefully aimed, deliberate act. The emphasis was on marksmanship above all else. The Glock, with its 15-round magazine and simple, consistent trigger, ushered in a new reality. Training began to shift focus from slow, precise bullseye shooting to a more pragmatic doctrine of threat suppression. The reality proven in bloody encounters like the Miami Shootout was that in the chaos of a real gunfight, a high volume of accurate, rapidly delivered fire was often what won the day. The Glock was the perfect tool for this new philosophy, allowing officers to stay in the fight longer and effectively answer the overwhelming firepower they were now facing on the streets. In the years that followed, Glock's conquest of the American law enforcement market became absolute. The brand achieved a level of market dominance that no other firearms manufacturer had ever seen. It became the standard issue sidearm for an estimated 65% of U.S. police departments, from the federal level with the FBI down to small-town sheriff's offices. The Glock became the benchmark against which every other service pistol was judged. Competitors like Smith & Wesson, Sig Sauer, and others were forced to abandon their traditional designs and create their own polymer-framed, striker-fired pistols just to remain relevant. In essence, they had to build their own Glocks. Today, the image of the Glock 19 is as inextricably linked to the American police officer as the Smith & Wesson Model 10 was to their predecessors. It has become a cultural icon, a ubiquitous presence in films and television, instantly recognizable as the modern symbol of law enforcement. Its legacy is not just in the millions of units sold, but in the countless lives, both police and civilian, that have been saved because an officer had a tool that was reliable, simple to use under extreme duress, and provided the capacity needed to end a violent confrontation. Ultimately, the story of the Glock 19's success is a story of the right tool arriving at the exact right moment in history. It is the story of how a dose of Austrian pragmatism, unburdened by a century of tradition, provided a direct and brutally effective solution to a deadly American problem. It wasn't just a better pistol, it was a better answer. An answer to the question posed by the gunshots that echoed through Miami in 1986. It is a legacy written not in marketing materials or sales figures, but in the quiet confidence of an officer on patrol, knowing that the simple, reliable, and capable tool on their hip gives them the best possible chance to go home at the end of their shift.